Hey everyone, my name is Dave and welcome here to NTD Racing. Today we're doing something totally different. I'm usually working on two race trucks, and today we're building something for one of my teammates' sons. So one of the guys on our race team, his boy had a birthday, and this is the stuff he gets. I wish, hey Dad, this is what I should have got when I was a kid. He's got an electric bike and he's got a golf bag, and he's going to take this golf bag to the golf course, and they want to make a rack that goes onto the back. So we're going to be using Fusion 360, which is CAD and CAM, computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing, all in one program. One of my favorite programs to use, and I use it a lot. And we'll take that program, and we're going to put it on the Langmuir Systems CrossFire XR and cut out the parts. And you're going to see some really cool stuff. I'll show you the secrets that I use, especially for taking dimensions and then translating those into something I can use in CAD. And then we're going to show you just how we fabricate things on the Langmuir Systems CrossFire XR. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. And if you like the CrossFire XR and you want one of those for your shop, use code NTD Racing and you can get a discount if you want to learn more about it. I've got a ton of videos in our playlist on how to use Fusion 360 and Langmuir Systems CrossFire XR. Let's go ahead and get to the dimensions on this, and then we'll drop it into Fusion 360. All right, so this is looking top down on where we're going to mount or make these brackets for the golf bag. And so we're going to basically use these 4 bolt holes right here. We're going to make a bracket. It's going to be bent and it's going to come up and kind of have like a cradle on it. So the trick is, these bolts, they look like they're parallel-ish, but they're, it's kind of some kind of weird parallelogram or rhombus. I don't know, some shape like that. But how do you figure out where these are and how do you put that into CAD? Let's go ahead and take a look. And the way I think about it is these are not, this isn't like a square or a rectangle, but these are actually 2 triangles. And that's the way that I'll attack it as far as taking the dimensions. So I will use my calipers. I'll just use the most accurate thing that I've got to take the measurements, kind of that aim small, miss small thing. And I'll just start taking the measurements. And I've already done this once. I'm just kind of doing a second time as far as like, just measure twice and cut once. So there I did the first one, and I get 3.174. And that is pretty darn close to what I got the first time, 3.174. And what I'll usually do is I will close it, I will zero it out again, just to make sure I didn't mess something up. And then I'll measure it. And if I don't get the exact same thing twice, and my tripod's in the way, if I don't get the exact same thing twice, I'm gonna start all over again and make sure I got it right. So I got from center to center, I see 3.172. So I'm going to stick with that 3.174 and say that's pretty darn close for that. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this is a triangle with these 3 points, and then that this is a triangle with these 3 points. And here's something, like this looks like a machine part and it looks all symmetric, but what I found is I measured it across here and say I get 5.939 from here. And I go over here, and you would think it would be the same, but no, it's actually different. It's actually 6.059 or as the dimensions that I got there. And then just from there, I get the rest of the dimensions, and I go ahead and plug them in there. And then now we can go ahead and take these dimensions and put them into Fusion 360 and start designing out these parts to match up with these holes. All right, so this here is the nerdy CAD part of this whole thing. And then there's also some CAM at the end, but it ends up being long. It's maybe 20 some minutes long. Not everybody wants to watch that. So I will put this part of the video at the very end. So if you want to watch all that in detail on how I go about designing this part and all the math, all that kind of stuff, then please stay tuned to then. But right now we'll get into the part that has all the fire in it. Got my kind of checklist going. I've zeroed out the machine over again to the top left of the material that I'm going to use. I have grounded the machine, the plasma cutter, right to the piece of metal I'm cutting to. I've got the computer set up with the program ready to go. I have the full shop air pressure going through my Harbor Freight dryer, and then on the plasma cutter side, it's just dialed all the way up to full power, 45 amps for this one. So let's go ahead and get this thing cutting. Here we go. Man, what a cool build this was, and happy birthday, Ben. I hope you enjoy the new rack there we made you. And this is the kind of stuff that we do on the channel all the time. So if you like seeing this kind of stuff where we fabricate and build stuff, cars, rail cars, bikes, those kinds of things, then please consider hitting that subscribe button below. If you think you like one of those tables, you can check it out at ntdracing.com. We have all the discount codes there, or just NTD Racing when you check out at Langmuir Systems. We'll get you a discount. We got a lot of other cool stuff like coolers and tools, and you'll find discounts at our webpage at ntdracing.com. So some really cool stuff. Also, a really big announcement coming up for NTD Racing, maybe over the next 2 weeks. Huge announcement for us. I'm super excited to tell you about it. Just got to work out some details. We will see you next week. Take care of yourself. All right, let's get to this thing. Here is Fusion 360, and we're going to be doing some sketching. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say create a sketch. And you can see over here on this thing, I want to sketch on the front. And then when I click on front, that's going to put Y in the vertical and X in the lateral there. And that is the way that the Langmuir Systems CrossFire XR, that's all the way all the plasma tables they cut on the X and Y, and the Z is your torch height control. And I'm going to usually kind of work around the center here to give myself something to work off, and I'm going to start with a line. And so I'm going to hit the hotkey L to select a line. I could have selected this button over here, but hotkey L will take you right to making a line. And I'm going to turn on construction lines. And what construction lines do is they allow you to draw something without making a tool path. So it won't cut this line. It's just something I'm going to use for reference. And along here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say this line right here is that the distance between those two smaller bolts, which is 3.174 inches. And I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to click on these things over here are constraints. And when you add constraints, you can make things parallel, tangent, and this right over here is a midpoint. So I'm going to say I want this line here to be right on the center origin, and that's going to make that the midpoint. And that'll help me later on, especially because I'll probably mirror things. That'll be something else I'll show you later on when I do that. And then now let's make all those triangles that we were talking about. So I know that the next leg of this triangle, so I'm going to hit hotkey L. I'm going to start here, and over here in space, it doesn't really matter where. I'm going to select 4.148. I'm just going to leave it out there and say, okay, there's that piece of the triangle. And then kind of, let me see, this other piece of the triangle is that this line is, let me see here. It is 5.971, so 5.917. There is that leg of the triangle. Now I got this triangle, and that's going to be from these points right here. You're like, that's 4 points. That sure looks kind of weird. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and pick a constraint, and I'm going to say I want these things to be coincident. I want this point right here to be coincident with that point, and that snaps, and there is that triangle. So there's those two bolts and that one down over there, and that's exactly where they are in relation to each other. Now let's make the other triangle. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit hotkey L, and from this point all the way over to here, I knew it was 6.064 inches. Pretty close. I say exactly. I don't know. Making it up. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this point over here, and we'll say from there it is 4.187. Enter. And then now I'm going to hit this hotkey or this key over here for coincident. I'm going to pick this point right here and that point right there, and then those snap together. And then now you see where those holes are lined up with each other. I'm going to get my calipers out one more time, and we're going to put some circles on here. So I'm going to turn construction lines off. And these bolts were all different. So I'm going to go ahead and let me see. So the first bolts, turn my calipers on, they're about 0.2. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to give myself some slop there because there's a big washer on it. I'm going to say hotkey C, which is going to pull up my circle. And this hole right here, I'm going to say 0.25. And I'm also going to say 0.25 just because the plasma cutter has an easier time cutting a slightly bigger hole. And I find that about 1/4 inch is about as small as it likes to go. Hotkey C again. And right over here, I'm going to say 0.25. There we go. And I should be able to cut those size holes. Let's get the other bolt. These other holes were just slightly bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and measure these. I see 0.22 with a big old head on the end of the bolt. So I'm going to say hotkey C, and I'm just going to make my life easy in case I don't do my measurements exactly right. I'm going to say 0.3, hotkey C, there, and 0.3. Boom. There's the, now all those holes are exactly where they are from looking top down on top of that. So now let's go ahead and build the rest of this thing. So I know across the front of this, I want it to be 6 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to hit a hotkey L again. Actually, let me see. Yeah, I want that. I want to get the construction lines here. And off of this point, let's say I want it to be about 3/4 of an inch. 4 to those bolts right there, so 0.75. Enter. That kind of gives me a point here also, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn construction lines back off, hotkey L, and off of that center point, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line that's going to be 6.75 inches. I'm going to go back up to my constraint. I'm going to say I want that line's midpoint to be on that point, and it's going to center that up with that. And then off the back over here, I just want it to be about the same. So let's just go with a construction lines on, hotkey L, and off of here, let's just go 0.75 inches again, and then we're going to go construction lines back off, hotkey L again. This is going to be 11 inches. The width of the widest point of the bag is 9 inches, and so I want 1 inch on either side, so we're going to say 11 inches, and I should not have finished that line, so I'm going to Control Z to get out of that, hotkey L again. I'm going to draw this line one more time, and 0 degrees, 11 inches, and I'm going to put the midpoint of that line right there. Cool. And then now we're just kind of connecting some dots. I'm going to put this line, I'm going to connect with that line, this line I'm going to connect with that line. So there is basically the base of this thing. And, you know, to make it look just a little bit nicer, what I'll probably do is I'll probably get the little fillet option, I think it is, and I'll just kind of soften these lines up a little bit. I'll start by selecting the dimensions for that one, and then I'll go over here and do the same for this one and hit enter. So that's the way that will look on the front. Now let's pick the top of this thing. So we know that once I make this bend, because I will bend this thing right here, that I want that thing to be, I want the base of the bag to be 9 inches higher than the front of the bag. So we're going to go straight up here, hotkey L, construction lines on. We're going to go straight up 9 inches. All right. And then we're going to make another line here, and that kind of just making this design up here as we go. So I'm going to turn the construction lines back off, go straight up. I don't know, I'm kind of making this up. All right, so I got that vertical line, which is 11 inches. I'm going to hit hotkey L again. I'm going to come across 1 inch. And then from here, you know, there's probably a bunch of different ways to do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say just hotkey L, or just pick up that line. And I'm just going to start making some lines that bring me down to that point right there. So I'm going to escape. Now I kind of got this wacky line right here. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of start softening all these things up. So I'm going to pick this and that. I'm going to say, okay, that looks pretty good. And then from here to there, I'm going to go ahead and soften this one up. From there to there, I don't know, something like that. Looks pretty good. And then from here to here, pick that again. Make this radius really nice and smooth. Enter, and then I'm going to go from here, pick this to this one, and make this radius nice and smooth. All right, and that looks pretty good. That looks good as far as half of it would go. So what I want to do is just try to make it do the same thing on the other side. So we'll go ahead and use the mirror function. So you go over to create. We're going to select mirror and pick all the things that we want to mirror. So I want to mirror this line. I want to save that line, that line, that line, basically all of them. So I'm just going through and picking everything that I want to mirror all the way to there. So I got all the parts I want to mirror. It looks like it's 10 parts. Now you got to select a line And I already have this construction line drawn here. If I didn't have this construction line drawn here, I would have to go in and draw one or something. So I got to give it something to mirror it off. So once I select that, I say, oh, that's exactly what I want. I say, okay. Now I can go in here. I'm like, that kind of comes to a point. It's not exactly what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and do this between these points and kind of make that nice and smooth. And there is the shape that I want. I think that looks pretty trick. That looks pretty awesome. Now, when I cut this thing, I have this line down here. I don't want it to cut that. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say, get rid of that line right there and that line right there. So now this is the basic shape that I wanted to cut. Although that looks a little bit sharp right there. Let's go ahead and fillet that also. Boom, boom. Radius it, I guess. I don't think it's a fillet. Might be using the wrong terms. There, enter. Cool, that looks good. All right. Now what I want to do is extrude this. And the way that you know that you can extrude the part is that it has become blue. And by extrude, I mean I want to go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. If you look over here on the sidebar, you see that all I have is a sketch. And as I go down, I've basically been sketching one time this whole time, and this is what I've got. If I stop sketching and started sketching again, I might have a second sketch down here. But what I'm going to do is extrude this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the E key. And that brings up my options over here for extruding. And then for the extrusion, I want to create a new body. So I'm selecting this thing and I said, yep, sure enough, I want to make a new body. Now you got to be careful what happens over here, because if you're not paying attention, you might be joining or cutting or something like that. But you want to make sure that new body, at least in this case, is selected. And then what I also like to do is kind of look at it from the side. So I'll grab this kind of cube over here, I'll push it over from the side, and I'll kind of see which way do I want it to extrude. In this case, I'm using 1/8 inch steel, so 0.125 is the size that I want from that. I'll hit enter. And then now, and let me actually Control Z out of that. I want to go back to what I just did so you can kind of see a pretty important point that you need to pay attention to while you're doing this. Hotkey E. I'm going to extrude this part. It's going to be a new body. I just kind of look at it over here, pull it out just a little bit. There's my dimensions, 0.125. And right before I hit enter on this part, watch over here where it says sketches. And when I hit OK, pop, there it goes, bodies. Now I have sketches and now I have a body, because this has become a 3-dimensional part now, and that is a body. So that piece right there, is what you would want, especially as you have, like, say, later on I'm going to show in some of my other videos how I make suspension parts, and those become just a whole bunch of bodies in there. And you need to separate those out and lay them flat on that X and Y plane to 3D print stuff. So that's why that becomes important. So there we got that. Now, I kind of want to make this thing look kind of cool. I'm going to turn on origins again so I can see that. I might even turn the sketches on so I can see the sketches on there. All right, so now that we got this basic design, I'd like to customize a little bit and get some initials on here. So let's put some text on here. And here's a thing. This is I would call it the top. This is what's facing the front of the bike, but you'll never see this when the bag is on it. So you'll see it from the other side. So we are going to sketch on it. However, I'm going to sketch on the back, so that when you read the text, you can see it from the back of the bike, can't see it from the front, and it'll be a stencil. And let's go ahead and we're going to do a sketch, and we're going to sketch on the back side of this body. And then from where it's going to bend is right around here. I'm going to draw some lines here to kind of make this sketch work. So let's go hotkey L. We're going to turn on construction lines. And I'm just going to go with, I don't know, right about here, somewhere in the middle, to right about, let me see, yep, right about there, and say escape. So I drew that construction line. So why did I do that? So I'm going to go over here to create. I'm going to turn construction lines off. I don't know that that matters for text, but I'm just going to turn it off for good measure. And then there's 2 different options here. Here's one that you create text, and I just find that this is a hard one to use because it does some weird stuff. I don't know, maybe it's just for me. This one does text along a line, and like if you did a circle, I think it would do like a circular text. In this case, it's going to do text along this line right here. I'm going to select it, and then it's going to give me some text. So when I get the text there, it's that direction. I flip it this way. So I probably could have done it from the other side, but just for good measure, I'm gonna do that. I'm using stencil A. I'm not selecting bold, and I'm using italics. I think it might look kind of cool. I don't know. And then BP are our initials. And that looks about the right size. Let's see what 3 inches looks like. 3. That maybe looks okay. I just feel like we're kind of jeopardizing maybe some integrity of this thing if we make it too big, but I don't know. Maybe that's kind of cool. I'll put it right about there, move it around. And kind of the nice thing about that line being there, it just makes it easy to move this around. In the other mode, it kind of does some really weird stuff. So there that is. So that's where that is. Now I want to extrude that. So I'm going to hit hotkey E for extrusion. I'm going to select this thing that I want to extrude, and I'm going to kind of make us look at it the side again, just so it makes sense what we're doing. I'm going to take the arrow and I'm going to cut it through the thing. And now you see over here on the extrusion that I'm making a cut, and you can kind of see it in red over there. Hit OK, and now it has cut that image out of this thing. So there we go. I think so far that's looking pretty good. What are some other things? We might want to have some locations to strap this thing down. So maybe we'll put a circle on both sides, maybe 2, just in case you want to, I don't know, strap some other stuff down or have some other hooking locations. So let's go ahead and put some circles on there. So we're going to create another sketch. We're going to go, this time let's go back onto the front, just because it seems like it likes to do that better. And let's go hotkey, create sketch on that surface. Now we're in the sketch mode, hotkey C, and let's just, I don't know, make a circle right here. And I would say that, 0.5 inches is maybe a little more, maybe 0.7 inches is probably a good size hole if you wanted to put a bungee cord through that. I'm gonna escape out of that. I'm not gonna do that circle. I'm gonna move it just hotkey C. I'm gonna move it right over here to a slightly meatier part of the this thing right there. How about one right there? And then hotkey C again. We'll move one. I think I can do that. Yeah, put it in line with that. Put one right down here. Say 0.7. There we go. And then now I just want to, this is a different sketch, I don't think I can do a mirror. So I'm going to go construction lines off the center. I'm going to make a line and then escape. So it gets rid of that line. And I'm going to say mirror those 2 circles. I don't want to do that. I don't want to grab that. I want to select that center line. It puts those over there. Okay. I'm going to hit hotkey E. I'm going to extrude these circles. I got to grab all 4 of them. 2, 3, and 4. Nope, I don't want that. I want the circles. And I'm going to go make a hole. I'm going to do a cut, and boom, there's all those. So there we go. That's what this thing's going to look like. So that's what it's going to look like from the front. This will be the top where it mounts that thing. And once I bend it up, this is what it'll look like from the back. I think that looks pretty trick. All right, so now we're done with the CAD portion of this. Now I'm ready to cut this thing out. Now, it's worth, kind of paying attention to what your sheet metal looks like. In this case, if I got it oriented another way, I kind of like to cut my stuff lengthwise as much as possible. So I'm going to hit the hotkey M right now, and I'm going to say I want to move this body, and I'm just going to rotate it 180 degrees, or 90 degrees, I'm sorry. And there we go. So now that thing is sideways. I'm going to turn all the sketches off so I don't see that sketch in the background. So that's the way it's going to cut out of the machine. I'm going to go now to, all right, I'm ready to go from CAD. Now I'm in CAM. This whole thing is computer-aided manufacturing. So first I go to setup, and setup is going to basically tell me how is the thing going to be oriented in the machine. What's the name going to be of this thing, basically. So here's the thing. If I got a couple different pieces, I'll have to select each one of the bodies I want in this one. But right now I need to pick the box point. In my case, just the way I do it, it might not be right, but I always start at the top left of my sheet metal and I work down to the bottom right as if I'm reading across a page. So I select this in this top left corner, which will be where I zero out my machine, and it's always kind of makes it easy because it's always the top left is where I'm going to start doing that stuff. Cool. All right. And then I'm going to name it. All right. golf bag holder. Here we go. So now I'm going to go to cutting. And I got to select a tool that I'm going to cut it with. There's probably a way to make that my default. I don't know. Go to the library. And I've been using the Razor Weld 45 for years now. I say it every time. As soon as that thing fails me, I will get another Hypertherm, but that thing's been awesome. Let me see. 1/8 inch plate still. I think I've been cutting this about 95s, probably pretty close. Maybe 100's probably a little better. I'm going to lead in. I lead in slightly slower. So let's lead in at 80 inches per minute. And then I rip out. I come out pretty quick. I lead out at, say, 120 because I don't want it to spend too much time there on the pieces. It does that. All right, I'm going to select this point or the whole thing to be cut. And then I come all the way over to here. This is where it's going to be a little bit tricky because those 1/4 inch holes are so small. It's going to be tough to make a lead in and a lead out. I might actually go 0.02, just slightly less. I always make 90 degrees on my lead in and lead out. And this is a number that's really kind of going to get you. So if it's too big, it actually won't make a tool path for the holes are too small. So in this case, we got to pick a really small value here. Let's just guess a 0.1 will work. And I'm going to make this point over here. Let's do right this point right here. Let's make that our entry point for this thing. So it starts cutting here. And that's just because that part's gonna be hidden underneath the bag and all that. You won't see that in case we do have some kind of a entry and exit wound on this whole thing. And we'll say, okay, now we're gonna just make sure that we get the full tool path. And you see that it did. The ones I was really kind of concerned with were these holes right here, which are the small ones. And you kind of see what that tool path is going to look like. It's going to basically fire the torch here, and then it's going to go, and it's going to make that radius, and it's going to cut all the way around, and it's going to rip off really quick right there. And hopefully we won't get too big of a mark right there. I tend to always get some, especially since I'm cutting some, 1/8 inch plate or 1/4 inch plate. The bigger, sometimes it seems like the more of a mark that you'll get from that. But there we go. From there, we'll go ahead and post the G code. You want to check your pierce delay. A 0.2 has been working pretty good for a point pierce delay for me. And I'll put that in Matthew's folders. He won't really care. Actually, yeah, that's fine. I'll just remember it's in Matthew's airplane folders. We make a whole bunch of airplane parts. And I'll post that. There, now we can go ahead and take that over to the Langmuir Systems CrossFire XR and cut it out.